At first, I would like to thank to invitation, and will congratulate the whole team of Dr. Şentürk for this wonderful organization and congress. And I think under speakers, I have the shortest way to Congress Hotel because my medical faculty is only 300 meters far from here, and therefore it was for me easy way. But the topic is, I think, a little bit complex. So if I go to tram in Istanbul, in Aksaray, and in Sultanahmet, so in the same time I heard a lot of languages, Arabic, Turkish, English, German, and so on. And the same situation, same experience I made also in Berlin or in the United States and so on. Therefore, I think we have multiculturality or multi-religiosity is a reality in our society. But the question is, how can we solve the very important and existential problems of a multicultural and multi-religious society? And I think the most interesting problems we have in the bioethics and medical ethics, and my hypothesis is we can understand maybe each other better if we speak about medical, ethical, and bioethical problems. Therefore, in my following presentation, I will first describe two cases in intercultural setting with regard to their ethical implications. Out of these examples, in the second part, I will try to develop an adequate concept for an intercultural setting in a value pluralistic society. The first case, a 23-year-old Turkish Muslim man living in Germany was diagnosed with malignant cancer. The patient's health conditions deteriorated increasingly, with a growing probability of his demise being imminent. Neither the patient himself nor his parents spoke German very well. With the help of an interpreter, the physician informed the patient about his current health condition and its expected course, though the patient's parents had been opposed to giving him this information. Death occurred 2 days after this conversation. It's a really piteous situation. And later on, the parents tried to hold the physicians responsible for the death of their child, claiming that by giving him such information, they had contributed to a deterioration of his health condition and thus hastened the death of their child. So, I think the main question is here, what is the ethical justifiable truth-telling strategy in a value pluralistic society? And also we can discuss about the universal character of patient autonomy in such situations. And my second case, a 6-day-old child of Turkish Muslim parents is suffering from type 2 autopalatodigital syndrome. This is a very rare genetic disease leading to several anomalies in the formation of several organs. The child can only live on invasive life support, but even on a ventilator, it is bound to die within a very short period of time. The German medical team suggests refraining from providing maximal therapy and limiting the extent of therapy. The parents, however, insist on maximal therapy, emphasizing that this decision results from their Muslim faith, according to which they would be held responsible in the afterlife if they agreed to any other option. So the question is, how can we define? So we use as a medical ethicist in the practice the term, the best interest of the child in such situations. So the question is, how can we define the best interest of the child at the end of life in an intercultural setting? All the cases presented so far have happened in various German hospitals. It would actually be a great opportunity for me to be able to discuss these cases with you. But my presentation has another focus. Rather, what I would like to do in the remaining minutes is reflect to ethical principles which can be applied in the analysis and resolution of these kind of cases occurring in clinical intercultural settings. It also happens in intra-cultural constellations that parents want to shield their son from the distress of a negative diagnosis. Parents of an incurably ill child may request maximal therapy despite a lack of medical perspectives. However, in these conflicts, certain attitudes and arguments are coming to the fore which are not common in the cultural environment of the healthcare team, to whom they may appear unfamiliar. Those attitudes and arguments may be linked to specific religious faith, principles, or arise from a cultural practice which in this form is not understandable or familiar to the medical team. Hence, the difference between this kind of everyday conflict is not categorical, but rather gradual, which is to say they are conflicts occurring equally in intracultural contexts, but reach additional ethical dimensions due to the intercultural constellation. It is thus not the kind of conflict that is different, but mainly the culturally specific form of argument or attitude. It is thus appropriate for a value-pluralistic society like that in Germany or the United States to ask ourselves what an adequate ethical way of dealing with these conflicts could be. It's particularly problematic if in this context prima facie principles such as patient autonomy, beneficence, or non-maleficence are uncritically applied. US bioethicist Ruth McLean stands for a broad patient autonomy approach. So the question is what kind of patient autonomy concept we need in a multicultural, multi-religious society. In her hierarchy of ethical principles, autonomy occupies the top position. Her approach claims universal validity for all cultures and intercultural contexts. She is convinced that her approach can accommodate any culturally determined decisions in medical practice. We should not forget, however, that patient autonomy in its application as proposed by McLean has not originated from a culturally neutral space. While some of its ethical foundations, such as human dignity, are generally acknowledged in the world community, its specific implications are intimately correlated with a particular concept of humanity generated in a specific cultural tradition. Whatever this concept of humanity differs, rank and implications of patient autonomy may differ too. And I'm coming to a second position. In contrast to McLean, the Chinese medical ethicist Ru Ping-Fan claims that the principle of autonomy and implied in it self-determination as postulated by McLean is not universally valid. He holds that a universalistic approach cannot do justice to the cultural elements of the doctor-patient relationship. For example, McLean's concept of patient autonomy could not be reconciled with family autonomy, an integral component of medical decision-making from a Chinese Confucian perspective. A coherent and genuine application of this concept, including relevant modifications aimed at different cultural spheres, does, however, presuppose a degree of moral homogeneity within each social group which we cannot expect under the conditions of global community. So I'm coming to the last part of my presentation. Moving on from this critical discussion of opposing positions, I would like to propose a new approach, which we may call an integrative particularistic approach. This concept has been developed in response to the above-mentioned theoretical problems as well as practical inadequacies, with the aim to reach a more appropriate consideration of cultural values in medical ethical practice. So it is also my result of my habilitation in Germany, this concept. This model is based on a well-organized, structured communication with the patient and his or her relatives insofar as the latter are of central concern to the patient. Starting point is not on all-encompassing concept of patient autonomy as a foundation upon which culturally specific forms of decision-making can be played out. Rather, the culturally bound moral values and attitudes of the patient should be the basis for the definition of a specific concept of patient autonomy. This procedure avoids an unreflective appropriation of cultural practices from the patient's cultural sphere or origin and prevents the danger of a culturalistic fallacy. And I'm coming to my conclusions. My talk has been focused on the adequacy of ethical principles applied in intercultural and interreligious settings. The sample cases as well as other conflicts in intercultural medical practice have made clear that the routine application of any given set of ethical principles raises several ethical issues. Reflection on these problems brings us to the following conclusions. My first conclusion is ethical conflicts at the end of life arising in intercultural contexts differ from those in intracultural situations gradually rather than categorically. That is to say that the specificity lies not in the quality of the conflict, which is similar in intracultural contexts, but the conflictual arguments or attitudes are perceived as unusual or strange, as we have seen in the cases above. My second conclusion is, crucial for clinical ethics in an open society is not the question if, but in what way preferences and attitudes based on patients' and families' cultural values can be taken into consideration. Third conclusion, routine transfer of ethical principles with their conventional implications, even if they are juridically safe, is often not a suitable way for addressing and solving ethical conflicts in intercultural contexts. And my fourth conclusion is what is often required is ethical reflection about these problems and their applications in order to do justice to cultural phenomena and their ethical implications in the process of decision-making. And my last conclusion is we want to offer the model for intercultural settings characterized as an integrative particularistic approach as a constructive heuristics for dealing reflectively with ethical routine. Is another conclusion would be it is in the medical ethical practice is very, very difficult from the ethical perspective to know that from the phenotype of the patient to find the right way of ethical decision process. And I think this picture shows this situation very well. And thank you for your attention.